You've been told that AI is the future of computing, that every new computer needs artificial intelligence built in, that upgrading to a Windows 11 AI PC is essential for staying competitive, productive, and secure. But what if one of Microsoft's biggest hardware partners just admitted that nobody actually wants these AI-powered machines?
You've been told AI is the future of computers, that every new laptop needs it, that if you don't upgrade, you'll fall behind. But here's the problem. Nobody actually wants it, and that's not just my opinion, because now, Microsoft's biggest partner just admitted it publicly. Dell, one of the companies that literally builds the computers you use, just said that AI is confusing people, not helping them. Think about how big that is. This isn't some random critic on the internet. This is the company working directly with Microsoft. So in this video, I'm going to show you something most people haven't seen yet. What Microsoft promised, what this AI feature actually does behind the scenes, and why once you understand it, you might never look at your computer the same way again. Because there's one feature in particular that sounds helpful, but is way more invasive than people realize. At CES 2026, one of the biggest tech events in the world, something very unusual happened. Dell executives went on stage, and instead of hyping AI, they did the opposite. They said customers are not buying computers because of AI. In fact, they said AI is making things harder to understand. Now pause for a second. For the last 2 years, Microsoft has been pushing one message. AI is the reason to upgrade. New computers, new Windows, new features. Everything centered around AI. And suddenly, their biggest partner is saying, that's not what people care about. But here's the interesting part. Dell didn't just say this randomly. They said it after seeing real customer behavior, which means this isn't a theory. This is what people are actually doing. And once you understand why, everything starts to make sense. So let's go back for a second. Before people started rejecting this, before Dell stepped back, before the controversy, what exactly did Microsoft promise? Because this part matters more than it seems. They didn't present this as a small upgrade. They positioned it as a complete shift in how computers work. Microsoft said this wasn't just about speed or battery life or performance. They said this was the beginning of a new era. The computer that doesn't just respond to you, but understands you. And that idea is powerful, because if you think about it, computers have always been reactive. You click, you search, you open, and the computer just waits. But Microsoft wanted to flip that. Instead of you remembering everything, your computer would remember it for you, and that's where this feature comes in. Recall, now on the surface, this sounds incredible because it solves a real problem. Everyone forgets things. Where you saved a file, what you were working on, where you saw something important. And normally, you waste time searching, clicking through folders, trying to retrace your steps. So Microsoft asked a simple question. What if your computer had perfect memory? Instead of asking, where did I save that file? You could just say, what was I working on last Tuesday? And it would instantly show you. No folders, no guessing, just answers. And to make this possible, Microsoft added a new type of chip, an AI processor called an NPU. Think of it like a small brain inside your computer, designed to handle AI tasks quickly, without needing the internet. And that's important, because Microsoft made a very clear promise. Everything happens locally. Your data stays on your device, nothing goes to the cloud, nothing gets shared. So on paper, this sounds perfect. A computer that remembers everything, but keeps it private. And that's why people got excited, because it feels like a smarter, more helpful computer. But there's one question almost nobody asked. What does it actually take for a computer to remember everything? Because once you think about that, you start to see the trade-off. And that's where everything begins to fall apart. Because to remember everything, your computer has to capture everything. And when you see how it does that, you'll understand why this became such a big problem. So this is where things start to break, because once people looked closer at how this works, they found something Microsoft didn't really highlight. In the early version, all of this data wasn't even encrypted, which basically means it was stored like a normal file. Nothing special, nothing hidden, just sitting there on your computer. Now think about that for a second. Months of screenshots, your messages, your passwords, your personal activity, all stored in one place without strong protection. And this wasn't some small theory. Researchers actually tested it, and one of them built a simple tool that could extract everything in under 2 minutes. 2 minutes, no advanced hacking, no complex tools, just basic access to the system, and suddenly your entire digital history is visible. Now at this point, most people think, okay, but someone would need access to my computer. And that's true. But here's the part people underestimate. Getting access is not that hard. It doesn't always mean someone stealing your laptop. It could be malware. It could be a compromised app. It could be someone using your device for a few minutes. And once they're in, they don't need to search through your files. They don't need to guess anything. Everything is already organized for them. All your activity in one searchable database. And that's what makes this different. It's not just that the data exists, it's how easy it is to access once you're inside, but even that is not the biggest issue. Because the real risk isn't just how it was stored, it's what happens when this kind of data starts to build up over time. Here's where everything changes. Because this is what recall actually does. Every 5 seconds, your computer takes a screenshot. Not sometimes, not when you click something, every 5 seconds, which means everything on your screen is being captured. What you open, what you type, what you look at, everything, your messages, your emails, your passwords, your private information, even things you think disappear, don't actually disappear anymore. They're saved. Now at first, this might not sound like a big deal, because you might think, okay, but it's just on my computer. And that's exactly what most people thought. But let's slow down for a second, because think about how often you use your computer. You're not just working on one thing, you're switching between apps, checking messages, logging into accounts, opening personal stuff. Now imagine all of that being captured automatically every few seconds. Not the important moments, everything. And it doesn't decide what matters. It just records, which means there's no real filter, no real judgment, just a constant stream of snapshots building over time. Minutes turn into hours, hours turn into days, days turn into months, until your computer has a complete timeline of everything you've done. And this is the part most people didn't realize at first, because the idea sounds helpful, but the way it works is constant passive recording. And once you understand that, a bigger question starts to come up. What happens to all that data? Because it's one thing to capture everything, but it's another thing entirely to store it. Now here's where this gets much bigger than most people think, because this isn't just about your computer anymore. It's about how data actually moves in the real world. Most people imagine their laptop as something isolated, like everything just stays there. But that's not how things work. Your data is constantly being copied, moved, accessed, sometimes without you even noticing. For example, many companies automatically create backups of your device. That means all those screenshots don't just stay on your laptop, they get duplicated somewhere else. Now there are multiple copies, and every copy is another point of risk. Then you have remote access tools, IT support, work systems, admin controls. In many cases, someone else can access parts of your device remotely, which means they don't need to physically touch your computer. And then there's malware, which is even simpler. Malware doesn't need to hack everything. It just needs access to one place, one database. And with recall, that database already exists, fully organized, searchable, ready. So instead of trying to figure out what you did, It just reads it. This is what makes this fundamentally different. It's not just about collecting data, it's about centralizing your entire digital life into a single point. And over time, that becomes incredibly valuable, not just to you, but to anyone who can access it. Because think about what builds up. Days of activity, weeks of behavior, months of information, all in one place. Your habits, your work, your private moments, everything. And when that much information exists in one system, the question is no longer, is it useful? The real question becomes, what happens when something goes wrong? Because when everything is stored together, you don't lose one file. You lose everything. Now let's make this real. Because up to this point, this might still feel abstract, like it's just a technical issue. But the real impact shows up in everyday situations that happen all the time. For example, imagine a therapist using their laptop. They're writing notes during sessions, private conversations, sensitive details, personal information. All of it appears on the screen, which means all of it gets captured. Now fast forward. That laptop gets stolen or accessed or compromised in some way. The person doesn't need to break into different apps. They don't need passwords. They just open one place and everything is there. Months of confidential information. Now think about a business owner. They're working on a deal, emails, financial documents, negotiations, all of it visible at some point on their screen, all of it captured. If that data leaks, it's not just inconvenient, it can destroy the deal, cost money, damage trust. And here's the key pattern. In both cases, the system didn't fail. It worked exactly as designed. That's what makes this different. Now bring it closer to you, your messages, your accounts, your personal searches, your private moments. Things you don't think twice about because they feel temporary. But with this system, they're not temporary anymore. They're stored. And over time, they build a detailed picture of your life. Not just what you do, but how you think, what you search, what you write, what you care about. And when that much context exists in one place, it becomes incredibly sensitive. Because if someone gets access, they don't just see one thing. They see everything. And that's the real consequence here. It's not about one screenshot. It's about the complete story those screenshots create. And once that story exists, you can't really take it back. So after all of this came out, Microsoft had to respond because the backlash was immediate. People started asking questions. Security researchers raised concerns, and suddenly, this feature didn't look so helpful anymore. So Microsoft made changes. They added encryption. They made recall optional instead of automatic. They introduced filters to try to block sensitive information. On the surface, it sounds like they fixed the problem. Everything is now protected. Everything is more controlled. Everything is safer. But here's the issue. The core idea didn't change. Your computer is still capturing everything. It's still storing a timeline of your activity. It's just doing it with more layers of protection. And that sounds good until you think about it more carefully, because security doesn't remove risk. It just reduces it. And when you're dealing with this much data, even small risks become big over time. For example, the encryption is often tied to something simple, like a PIN code, something you use every day, something that's not designed to protect months of sensitive information. So now, instead of having no lock, you have a basic lock. But the system behind it is still the same. And over time, it's still collecting more and more data. And that leads to a bigger question. Not, is it secure, but should this exist in the first place? Because protecting something is very different from needing it. And this is where the conversation shifts from technology to behavior. Because even if everything works perfectly, there's still a reason people feel uncomfortable with it. And that's exactly what Dell started to notice. The issue isn't just security, it's something deeper. People don't want this behavior at all. Even if it's safe, It feels invasive, and that feeling matters more than the technology, because when people buy a computer, they're not thinking, I want something that records everything I do. They're thinking, I want something fast. I want something simple. I want something I can trust. And when a feature goes against that, people reject it, even if it's technically impressive. The issue isn't just security, it's something deeper. People don't want this behavior at all. Even if it's safe, it feels invasive. And that feeling matters more than the technology, because when people buy a computer, they're not thinking, I want something that records everything I do. They're thinking, I want something fast. I want something simple. I want something I can trust. And when a feature goes against that, people reject it, even if it's technically impressive. Dell didn't remove AI. They didn't fight Microsoft directly. They did something smarter. They changed how they talk about it. Their new laptops still have AI inside, but they don't lead with it anymore. Instead, they focus on things people actually care about: battery life, performance, design, reliability, and even more interesting, they brought back their old branding. After trying to go all in on AI, that tells you everything. They tested the idea, and the market pushed back. So what does all of this actually mean? It means something simple, but very important. AI is not the future. Useful AI is. There's a big difference. Microsoft built something powerful, but they focused on what AI can do instead of what people actually need. And that created a gap, because most people don't want more features. They want better experiences. They want things to feel natural, effortless, safe. And when a product ignores that, it creates friction, even if it looks impressive in a demo. That's why adoption is slow. That's why Dell changed direction. And that's why this matters, because this isn't just about Microsoft. This is happening across the entire tech industry. Companies are racing to add AI into everything, but the ones that win won't be the ones with the most AI. They'll be the ones that use it in the best way, quietly, usefully, and in a way that people actually want. And right now, that's the part Microsoft still hasn't figured out.